Okay, welcome back to the Investigative Journal on this November 28th, 2016 day on our calendar. I'm your host, Greg Anthony. You're listening to FirstAmendmentRadio.com. You can catch my show every evening from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. That's Pacific time. First Amendment also plays the show at 11 a.m., and if you can't get it there, go to my long-standing website at arcticbeacon.com, arcticbeacon.com, and you can get shows going back over a decade regarding what I call the Vatican-led New World Order. My show's also been called the alternative to the alternative media, and the reason is that I think I learned a long time ago when I was living in Rome, working there as a journalist, who the beast really is in the book of Revelations. Now, back then I didn't have any clue, but I saw the workings of this organization, the church that I grew up in as a Catholic, and understood after years of being there that something really fishy was going on. And when I started to understand that these secret societies had not only a secular point of view, a secular group behind these people who actually control the governments of the world, I saw there also was a spiritual component here, an evil component that was so ridiculous that I couldn't believe it way back in the 80s. And let me tell you what I'm talking about here. I was researching a number of stories regarding the Jesuit order in the Vatican and what they really were all about, because I was there during a time called the Vatican Bank Scandal, and I watched up close and personal what was going on behind the scenes as far as money laundering, as far as the connections between Masonic lodges and the Vatican and our government, the CIA, the funding of terrorism, the actual orchestrating of terrorism, these groups I'm talking about, orchestrating terrorism in Italy at the time. And I was a victim of one of those terrorist attacks, and that's how I really started to research it. And you can go back, and you can even get an article on the net. It's still there. It goes Rome, American newspaper bombed in Rome, 1982 UPI story, and you'll see my name there, and you can read all about it. That kind of got me interested in who the heck was doing this. Now, looking back, one of the most incredible stories, I was sitting in a coffee shop on Via Veneto, which is a very ritzy area of Rome, and I was delving into a number of different stories, and I had some friends who were basically actors and actresses, some Italian, some American. And I guess word got out because we'd sit around and talk about these stories. And one day I'm sitting there by myself, and this girl came up to me. And she was she must have been in her late 20s, very pretty Italian girl, very well dressed, very articulate. And I'll never forget, she said her name was Maria. And she told me about a story that I did not believe when she left. She sat there for about 10 minutes with me and talked about how she was involved in satanic rituals in the Vatican, that she came from an elite Italian family, and she was down in the catacombs with a number of other children watching a child sacrifice. And she left. And she said, I'll get in touch with you again. I didn't believe it. I said to myself, this is crazy. I mean, she's got to be a bit either there's something wrong. I didn't believe it. But as the years went on, her story I did believe. And I realized, boy, I missed an opportunity of really getting some more information about this. She ended up committing suicide. But the point I'm trying to make is that throughout the years, other people had verified these stories of these rituals that go on Some call them black mass, etc., etc. Now, these never get reported here. So let's fast forward to today. And I was just checking YouTube, and that's a good. Everybody is now communicating on YouTube. Okay, that's a big way of communicating now. And so I started checking. Now there's the story going around called Pizzagate, and it's about a pedophile ring that's out of a pizza parlor, very exclusive place in Washington, D.C. And the story first came out that when Clinton was running for president, she held a campaign party there. And so now there's been all these connections between satanic worshiping and child sacrificing in this Pizzagate story that's on now. Now, when you go to there, you get millions of people viewing this stuff. Millions. And what I'm getting at is this is what attracts people. Now, when you go to certain stories regarding the Vatican being involved in this, it doesn't get much. It gets some play, but not as much. So the connections seem to stop with, it's just some pedophiles and all these government people who are pedophiles, but it never gets to the real reason for all of this stuff. On most of these Pizzagate stories, and millions of people are watching this and listening to it. Now, if you really think about it, there has to be a connection between the Vatican and all of this going on. And what is it? And I think, we've covered many stories about it, and you can go and read and look at it. But the real, and for another thing, when you start looking at the pedophilia in the Vatican, in the Catholic Church, all of these stories, it all makes sense now, doesn't it? And when you go to stories like, I was looking at a story today where this guy came out and talked about his homosexual affair with Obama, and started talking about Obama, that Michelle he knows for a fact is a transgender and the kids are adopted. This gets millions of views. So the point I'm trying to get at is this seems to attract people, but the real story going on behind the elections and all of the connections to the Vatican and prophecy seem to get very few hits and views. For example, a friend of mine sent me a video by Walter Veith called The Trump Card, and I listened to it. Very good. I've played many of Walter's videos throughout the years, going back 10 years. And this started because I wanted to find out in America, when I came back from Italy, who understood the Vatican's role in the one world order, one world government. Now, when I looked at this great video by Walter, it gets 7,000 views. Now, comparison to the Pizzagate and all of these other millions and millions of views, it pales in comparison, but his information is so vital that I'm going to play parts of it in the next half hour, or when I get done talking about this. So I started looking for people who understood the Vatican, and I, of course, ran across Tony Alamo, who really understood this story, and the people in his ministry. Now he's in jail 175 years for trying to get this public. And also Tupper Saucy, the author of Rulers of Evil, I talked to many times before his death, interviewed him a number of times. Tony interviewed Alberto Rivera, the Jesuit priest, who talked about all of the things we talk about, how the Jesuit connection to the one world order exists, New World Order, and their role behind the scenes in promoting this one world government, one world religion. And then I'd interviewed Nuri Rivera, his wife, who still is alive, and she told me that definitely he was killed by the Jesuits. And so we get to these stories don't get much play, though, when you start looking at the numbers. And it goes to show that people have a lack of understanding of a number of really important things. Now, I just got sent something here, because I always talk about Christian persecution. It goes on here in America, more in a subtle way, as illustrated by the Tony Alamo Ministry. But I just got a report from John Levy, who's going to be on my show Wednesday, and what's going on, and he's representing a freedom movement in the Cameroons, which I was aware of a number of years ago, and sent me a press release regarding what's happening to Christians in the Cameroons and in Nigeria. And I thought I'd read to you part of this as we look at the persecution of Christians. This story won't get to the mainstream, but due to the current, this is the story he sent, due to the current wave of unrest in the southern Cameroons and the release of the Amnesty International report on extrajudicial killings in Biafra, John wants to make an important announcement in this freedom group in the southern Cameroons to all people who want to support what's going on in West Africa. Basically a genocide. And they report that Biafrans, Gabindans, southern Cameroonians, in the name of national self-determination, now consider and take up total armed resistance and self-defense. They're called the OEAS, expresses no confidence in the United Nations, African Union, and the International Criminal Court to protect the Biafrans and the other Christians in Nigeria and in the southern Cameroons from summary execution and detention. The Cabindans likewise have been abandoned by the EU, UN, and the African Union. The Nigerian regime openly promotes Sharia law, which regulates Christians to second-class citizens and subjects them to blasphemy laws. Boko Haram still enjoys support from elements of the Nigerian government. President Buhari continues to order summary execution and detentions of activists and Christians in Biafra and the Niger Delta. Okay, I'm going to only read part of that. I think you get the gist. And we'll have John on Wednesday to talk more about this persecution. But don't you think that's coming here? I mean, when we look at all the things that are happening, what's happening with this underground movement with all these charter schools, with the guy by the name of Fethullah Gulen from Turkey, who's started all these schools here and gets funding of over $150 million. And these schools are basically underground movements which will in turn be fundamentalist Muslim Sharia law. Look at England. There's over 45 Sharia courts operating in London. So we have a serious problem, and it seems these kind of things seem to get overlooked. And what happens is we talk about, and what I'm going to do is I want to play this parts of what Walter Veith has to say, because it doesn't get that much attention, to be honest with you. So I want to, the little bit more we can get from this show is also, I'm sure, appreciated. But the point is, when we look at this, let me just explain this. It's great information. Great information. The Hegelian Dialectic he discusses, we know what that is. The use of left and right and pitting those two groups together, what's happening now in the United States, and all they've used this for millennia to get their outcome. The outcome we have to remember is one world government, one world religion control. Whether that comes through killings like going on in Africa, or whether it comes through a more subtle way of controlling a population here in the United States and England and all over the West. The idea is to create a one world government that has no borders and a one world religion that is based in satanic values. It's a satanic group. That's why you see all. Just Google some of these Hollywood latest videos out. God, I can't think of there's one out that's so obvious. I mean, but all of these satanic videos that these singers are putting out are pretty obvious what's going on behind the scenes. But to get a real intellectual basis, the Walter Veith video is this one I'm going to play is very good. It talks about a number of very important things. But my addition to it is very simple. Got to look at the outcome here. Now they're gonna get their way no matter if Trump is in or Clinton was in, and it's just going about it in a different manner. My idea is, how are you going to live with it? Here we are. We're not going to. You can't change prophecy, biblical prophecy, and we have little power against the owners of this country and the world, don't we? I mean, we can talk to the cows come home, but to actually overthrow what they're doing is probably next to impossible. So you have to live with it, understand it, and find your solace in the Bible, in Christ. And I think when you look at hope, I mean, I've always said there's hope. You got to carve out a little bit here while we're on this earth. I mean, what else? What other choice do you have? With that, let me start this. It's called the Trump card. Very good. Thank you for sending this. And I thought, he's got some great information here. One of the things I liked about it was he found some information about all the presidents coming from the same bloodline. Now, we've reported on this in the past, but I didn't realize how many. I thought, well, there's got to be at least, maybe half, maybe a quarter. It's amazing what Walter had uncovered by doing some research. So that's an interesting thing, because we then can say, well, the control is there. If we look back into the control of these bloodlines, the Vatican had a lot to do with all of this stuff, way, way back and still today. So let's play this, and maybe you could learn something, and let's increase the views. I mean, if there's 1 million views for Pizzagate, and I checked out also Joan Rivers, because she had mentioned that Obama, Michelle was a transgender to the media, and then all of a sudden she's dead 33 days later. That gets millions and millions of views. But you're only getting a piece of what they're about. This Walter here puts it together for you pretty well, and maybe it will inspire you to research more. Here's Walter Veith with something he recently did called the Trump card.
Now, in politics, we are taken by surprise, but in prophecy, we have certainty. And when we look at the prophetic picture of the book of Revelation, then we can see that there is a plan and there is a movement in a particular direction. And even though it looks confusing out there and sometimes doesn't work according to our expectations, the plan will be fulfilled according to the prophetic picture. In Revelation, we read that the second beast will form an image to the first beast. Now, the first beast was identified by the Protestant world as the papal system, and the second beast was looked at in the Protestant context, and Wesley, in his time, expected that it would soon appear. And the only one that fulfills all the criteria of the second beast is the United States of America, that would make an image to the first beast. Now, the first beast, as we know, was a politico-religious system that dominated world events and world affairs. And so the second system will be the same, where politics and religion will be mingled with each other and will elevate the first beast in the process. Now, that is what the prophetic scenario says. And sometimes when we look at events in history, it seems as though the exact opposite is happening. JFK said the following: I believe in an America where the separation of church and state is absolute, where no Catholic prelate would tell the president, should he be Catholic, how to act, and no Protestant minister would tell his parishioners for whom to vote, where no church or church school is granted any public funds or political preference, and where no man is denied public office merely because his religion differs from the president, who might appoint him, or the people who might elect him. I believe in an America that is officially neither Catholic, Protestant, nor Jewish, where no public official either requests or accepts instructions on public policy from the Pope, the National Council of Churches, or any other ecclesiastical source, where no religious body seeks to impose its will directly or indirectly upon the general populace or the public acts of its officials, and where religious liberty is so indivisible that an act against one church is treated as an act against all. So Kennedy still stood for the absolute separation of church and state. Now, if the prophecy is to be fulfilled, then this situation must change, because the image must be like the original. And the original was church and state dictating morality to society. And so the second beast must, if it's to become an image, do exactly the same. Now, I believe one of the reasons why Kennedy disappeared from the scene and was assassinated was because he stood for these principles, besides other things that he did, like touch the Federal Reserve, etc. Now, under the two-party state in the United States, we seem to think that you are either voting for one system or another system. But that is, in fact, not the case. Quigley, who was, Bill Clinton's favorite professor, said the following in his Tragedy and Hope. The argument of two parties should represent opposed ideas and policies, one perhaps of the right and the other of the left, is a foolish idea acceptable only to doctrinate and academic thinkers. Instead, the two parties should be almost identical, so that the American people can throw the rascals out at any election without leading to any profound or extensive shifts in policy. The policies that are vital and necessary for America are no longer subject of significant disagreement, but are disputable only in details of procedure, priority, or method. In other words, what he's saying is that the two-party system is there just to appease the populace, but the general direction will be the same. The puppet masters behind the scenes will still control events as they deem fit. Now, some of the puppets might not even know what is happening because the puppet master is in control. And sometimes even high officials can be misled or be thinking that they are doing one thing when they are actually propagating something else. Now, this is how the Hegelian dialectic works. If we have a look at a definition, it says it's a framework for guiding thoughts and actions into conflicts that lead to synthetic solutions which can only be introduced once those being manipulated take a side that will advance the predetermined agenda. So there's controlled opposition, problem, reaction, solution.
Okay, so we got to take a break here. I'm going to try to finish parts of it. I don't think I can squeeze it in to 26 minutes next half hour, but I'll get to most of it. It's, information when we talk about the Hegelian dialectic. They use it in so many ways, not just political, but they'll pit one, like for example, in war. They control both sides of the war to get the outcome they choose. And is that going to happen when we have World War III coming up? Of course. And who controls it? Right from Rome. Back in 3 minutes on the Investigative Journal.
The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on internet or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the internet. Then, when you subscribe, we will send you the last quarterly MP3 CD of that program immediately, and continue to do so with each new quarter. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening.
The book of Revelation says, "The spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ." This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone, absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy.
Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it: to secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity. Invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host Melody Cedarstrom right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free 1-800-375-4188.
Okay, we're back for the second half hour of the Investigative Journal on this November 28th, 2016 day on our calendar, and I'm going over a video recently done by Walter Veith called The Trump Card, and he went through explaining the Hegelian Dialectic, how it applies to the Obama administration. For example, it seems that Christian values were basically being wiped away. Now Trump seems to be swinging the pendulum in the other direction. Let's pick it up right there.
As to whether the man was perhaps a clandestine Muslim. And there are pictures of his ring, which tends to be Islamic, and there are pictures of him in Islamic dress, and many, many statements to this effect. And if you look at the administration, many high officials are of the Muslim faith. So it seems as if America was being taken away from its Christian roots and swung in another direction. But prophecy said that the second beast, the United States of America, would implement legislation that would further the first beast, which is Catholicism. And therefore it must be a Christian nation bringing about Christian legislation. And here you had Obama taking the mindset in a totally opposite direction. This is a brilliant Hegelian dialectic. Whether he knew about what he was doing, whether he did it consciously, or whether he did it subconsciously is irrelevant. The fact of the matter is, this is what has happened. I believe, of course, that the insider elite is pretty clued up as to what the agenda is, but nevertheless, one can leave open the option that they might have done it unknowingly. But this was the legacy. And now, with the Trump administration, we are going to probably see the pendulum swing. Catholic Herald, Obama calls for world leaders to heed Pope Francis's message. The President of the United States said he wants fellow world leaders to reflect on Pope Francis' encyclical talking about the environment. So you have this dichotomy of thought. On the one hand, you have this movement towards a totally different religious system, and on the other hand, you have this underpinning of the papal system. And under his leadership, you had the visit of Pope Francis, where he went through the entire procedure almost like a president of the world being inaugurated, speaking from the balcony, which is a step higher than any of the presidents have done. So you have this dichotomy of thought. You have, on the one hand, the appearance that it's moving in this direction, and on the other hand, the realities of the laws that it's moving in another direction. And then you had the two opponents. You had the one standing for the principles of the right, the other one standing for the principles on the left, and it was a vicious campaign. Now, is this a dialectic, a Hegelian dialectic? Is this a game of good cop, bad cop, or two ideologies which are to undergo pendulum swing? Well, let's have a look at some of the facts without judging any of the individuals and see whether we can come up with some form of conclusion. Here we have the famous supper, the so-called charity supper that takes place just before the election, where you have the Archbishop of New York, who always is the head of the Knights of Malta in America, where he has this meal with the candidates that are to be elected for president. And you can see the jovial nature. This is church and state at its best. And the two of them smiling next to Cardinal Dolan. Now it's interesting when you look at the actions of these individuals, you also get this idea of this dialectic. I mean, if you take the Cardinal, for example,
I have to add one thing. In the picture they show Hillary in a purple dress next to the Cardinal. And I said a long time ago, people asked me, well, when did you know Trump was going to win? Because you were talking about that. And I said, well, I think I really figured it out when Hillary had her meeting with the Cardinal about a month before the dinner, the Al Smith dinner. And then Trump had it either right before it or right the day after. So I said, he's going to be their last choice because he's getting his final marching orders. Here we go. Wow, Walter.
He will make one statement, a very conservative statement, let's say, with regard to lifestyle choices or contraception. The papacy will make one statement, and the people who are supposed to live it out will do exactly the opposite. So you're confused. You're thinking, why are the Jesuits and the Knights of Malta doing the exact opposite of what the papacy has just proclaimed? Why do you have this dichotomy of thought? Well, you see, in this thinking, there's this yin-yang aspect. The white aspect and the black aspect, well, they augment each other. The one cannot exist without the other, so they say in this.
Now take that one step farther, and I said this a long, long time ago. And the black pope, who's the Jesuit general, and the white pope, it's the yin-yang. One can't exist without the other. And boy, when you start seeing that play out in history, there's an aspect in history when the papacy said the Jesuit order this was right before the American Revolution, was disbanded. It was a total lie. They just went undercover so they could get their dirty work done here in America. Back to Walter.
Yin-yang philosophy. So even within the ranks of the church, you have this dichotomy of thought. Now the two candidates, as we will see, fit the bill in every single aspect. If you go to the web pages and you look at the bloodlines of the American presidents, then it is a known fact that all the presidents that have, reigned in the United States have all been related. So let's have a look at what the media has to say. If all presidents are related, which of the 2017 candidates will be the next president? As it turns out, both Trump and Hillary Clinton are related to John of Gaunt, the 14th century royal. Gaunt was the first Duke of Lancaster, who was the son of King Edward III. According to MyHeritage, Trump is related through his mother, Mary Ann MacLeod, back to his 17th grandfather, John Beaufort, while Clinton is related through her father and the Rodham family back to the 17th great-grandmother, Joan Beaufort. The two candidates are 19th cousins, and so they both have the right bloodlines to continue this lineage. Now, that's another story as to why they should all be related, and it's fascinating that the Bible doesn't speak about the presidents of the world, it speaks about the kings of the world. And it really, over the course of history, hasn't mattered which of the candidates has won, because the candidates have always both been in the same bloodlines. Here are the American presidential bloodlines. Here's another page that explains this. Did you know all 44 U.S. presidents have carried European royal bloodlines into office? 34 have been genetic descendants of just one person, Charlemagne, the brutal 8th century king of the Franks. Now, that's a fascinating story, because Charlemagne is, of course, the one who was crowned emperor of the Roman Empire, the new Roman Empire, and the Pope was crowning him whilst his kingdom was falling apart. So he's a symbol of this unity of the world under one leadership, the papacy. And then if we go to Edward III of England, in fact, the presidential candidates with the most royal genes has won every single American election. Now, it seems as if Trump and Hillary had exactly the same lineage, so it didn't really matter which one of the two won. This information comes from Burke's Peerage, which is the Bible of aristocratic genealogy based in London. Every presidential election in America since and including George Washington in 1789 to Bill Clinton has been won by the candidate with the most British and French royal genes. Of the 42 presidents to Clinton, 33 have been related to two people, Alfred the Great, King of England, and Charlemagne, the most famous monarch of France. So it goes on. 90 of them are related to England's Edward III, and has 2,000 blood connections to Prince Charles. The same goes with the banking families in America. George Bush and Barbara Bush are from the same bloodline, the Pierce bloodline, which changed its name from Percy when it crossed the Atlantic. Percy is one of the aristocratic families of Britain to this day. They were involved in the gunpowder plot to blow up Parliament at the time of Guy Fawkes. Now that's even more fascinating.
And, the Jesuits were involved in that. And, just talking about what Walter said, and did we grow up with the false idea, what did you hear? Anyone can grow up to be president of the United States. I guess you should just add, anyone can grow up to be president of the United States if you were related to Charlemagne. Oh boy. Let's get back to Walter.
Because that was a Jesuit plot to overthrow the Protestant government in the United States. So if all these bloodlines belong to these individuals that overthrew Protestantism, well, that would be an interesting plot for the puppet masters to work on behind the scenes. But we're just looking at the facts, so let's continue. The male online predicted or showed that The Simpsons predicted a Donald Trump presidency, and it didn't end well. Time travel episode from 2000 featured broke nation relied on aid from China. Now, as we have seen in some of the previous series that we have made, The Simpsons the writers of The Simpsons are all probably insider individuals with more knowledge about what is going to happen in the world than most would deem possible. And as some candidates have said in the past, if something works out the way that it has worked out, it works out that way because it was planned that way. So there is that element, but there is also, of course, an element of luck maybe involved as well. Now, The Simpsons generally use many esoteric symbols in their productions, and they have been extremely accurate on a number of issues and have predicted many things that seemed unlikely or impossible years in advance. 9/11 being a case in point, the destructive events in the United States, and in their particular little issues, 16 years before this presidential election, they showed their character in the same dress as Hillary Clinton would be wearing, including the necklace, including the earrings, and that's rather fascinating. It's interesting that she actually wins the next election, but according to their scenario, Donald Trump would win the current election. So that's rather fascinating, and some of the statements and the ideologies that were contrasted there are, well, very strange to say the least. This comes from the year 2000, and they show Trump in his red tie and his jacket between the flags, and this happened in reality. So they're pretty accurate. But it gets even more bizarre because they show that Trump, that's in 2000, greeting the people in Trump Towers, going down the escalator, raising his hand, and again he has the red tie and the suit on. And reality, 2015, Trump greeting the crowds, going down the escalator of Trump Towers. I mean, it's pretty accurate. It's pretty sharp. Now, whether this is pure coincidence or whether it is not is actually irrelevant. Some of the more bizarre ones, rather interesting, are the maps that we will see in a moment. And you can see their character here saying, oh no, it's actually come true. And this is the map that has been going around where they show what the distribution of the votes would be, but this is actually not quite accurate because this one was actually one that they used in the Romney campaign, so it doesn't apply to that previous one. But nevertheless, it's interesting that they show these red demographics, and of course this picture has changed in the present one. So you can not really use this one. Now let's have a look at some other facts, because what we are interested in is prophecy and not the games and the dialectics that are being played in this world. The National Catholic Reporter tells us that Mike Pence, who is going to be the Vice President of the United States, which is a very, very powerful figure, is a born again evangelical Catholic. And the web pages in the world tell us this very thing. Now, that's somewhat of a misnomer, and a few years ago, that would not have been a possibility. To be a born-again evangelical Catholic would be considered an oxymoron. It would be impossible. In my youth, that would have been impossible. But the religious landscape has changed, and there's been such a merging of Catholicism and Protestantism that this contradiction in terms is today a common reality. So, a born-again evangelical Catholic. They say that he was a rather dedicated Catholic. Mike Pence, he was an altar boy and very dedicated. And what about Donald Trump? Well, Donald Trump attended an Ivy League school, so let's ask the Washington Post something about his background. When he was young, he went to the private Kew Forest School in Forest Hills, Queens, where his father, Frederick, a very wealthy real estate developer, was on the governing board. Behavior problems led Donald's exit from the school, at which point he was sent to New York Military Academy at the age of 13 by his parents, and who hoped the discipline of the school would channel his energy in a positive manner. He did well there and went to Fordham University, a Jesuit school in the Bronx. So Donald Trump tries to downplay his Fordham experience and rather to upplay his later experiences. And then he went to the University of Pennsylvania and studied economics for 2 years. So he did attend a Jesuit school, which is interesting and just one of the facts. Now let's go back to Mike Pence again. Postmodern evangelical Catholic conservative. But Pence is also very much a creation of the last half century of American political religious life. Born and raised Catholic, he became a Catholic youth minister and reportedly wanted to be a priest. But according to interviews, Pence has given over the years, interestingly, has more recently declined to talk specifically about his spiritual evolution. While in college from 1978 to 81, he began blending his Catholicism with evangelical Protestantism. I made a commitment to Christ, Pence said. I'm a born-again evangelical Catholic. So here we have a Catholic vice president who is in a position to reach out to evangelicals. Now it's fascinating that the other side, of course, had chosen Tim Kaine as their vice president. And the two met in debate, and apparently Mike Pence was the stronger candidate in that debate, or so they say. But nevertheless, would have made any difference, because both of these are Catholic gentlemen. And let's have a look what the Harvard Divinity School tells us about Tim Kaine and Mike Pence and faith. It says that Kaine was educated at a Jesuit high school and has been influenced throughout his life by Jesuits. Often seen as progressive and open-minded in the U.S., he's also been called a Pope Francis Catholic. What does it mean to be a liberal Catholic?
I have to mention this. We got a few minutes left. I won't get through all of this. But just in the last day or two, Fidel Castro passed away at the age of 90. And even the mainstream media reported that he was trained and went to Jesuit schools. So the Jesuits basically controlled both sides. They controlled communism, freedom in America. They basically also schooled Joseph Stalin, Adolf Hitler. Boy, I'm telling you, these guys get around, don't they? Now, don't you get my drift? How they control with the Hegelian Dialectic both sides of everything? And boy, we have been taken for patsies here in America, haven't we? A couple minutes more, Walter.
Reformer. Now, this is rather fascinating. So you have these high-profile Catholics as vice presidents, the one wanting to be a priest and was an altar boy, and the other one, all his training in Jesuit environments. Now, it's interesting that the Jesuits themselves say, or Ignatius Loyola said, that if you have to choose sides, then a Jesuit can choose one side and represent it to the point of death, while a fellow Jesuit may choose the opposite side and defend that to the point of death. That is the Hegelian dialectic. And it's fascinating how it works. So it really wouldn't have mattered which one of these two would have become the vice president. And it really wouldn't have mattered which one of these two would have become president. Now, before I even talked about this, I thought that Hillary Clinton would probably fit the modern profile somewhat better, but I also said it doesn't matter which one of them wins. But now on reflection, it becomes rather interesting that it went the way it went. Now, in the discussion here with these people from Harvard, Donald Trump's running mate, Governor Mike Pence, described himself as a born-again evangelical Catholic. Is this an unusual faith mix? And what does this combination say about his public service? And the answer? I'm not quite sure what Governor Pence intends to affirm by a born-again evangelical Catholic. He comes from an Irish Catholic background, was raised as such during college, Indiana, Hanover College. He had an evangelical religious experience under the influence of a non-denominational group. However, in the following years, he still considered himself a Catholic, went to Mass, worked as a youth minister at a Catholic church, and even thought of becoming a priest. However, in the mid-1990s, he joined the Grace Evangelical Church, which is affiliated with the Evangelical Free Church in America. One could describe it as a Baptist denomination.
Okay, we're all out of time, and we're going to I got about 20 minutes left of this. Should I pick it up tomorrow? Well, if in the meantime, you can go get this, just to look up Walter Veith, the Trump card, and you can listen to it yourself, and it's good to listen to it a few times. So, anyway, we'll be back tomorrow on the Investigative Journal.
Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.
I know you all want answers, and believe me, so do I, and I'll do my best to get them.
Despite Nicolas Cage's promise to do his best to get left behind rapture answers for us, don't hold your breath. Not everyone believes Left Behind is true prophecy. Some may even regard as conspiratorial the mainstream re-release of the Left Behind movie, with actor Nicolas Cage portraying the main character, as an attempt to further reinforce in the minds of all this perception of false prophecy, in order to condition the masses for the play about to begin. If you want true Bible prophecy answers, get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. The author exposes the Latin rapture origin, the 7-year tribulation deception, true Bible revelation of Daniel's 70 weeks, the abomination of desolation, the restrainer, America in the Revelation, the image of the beast and the mark of the beast, and the truth about God's chosen people, and so much more about Bible prophecy. This book will shatter the Left Behind paradigm of future events. Get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.